The morning sky over Seoul changed forever when three massive silver ships appeared above the city. The ships were so large they blocked out the sun and cast shadows over entire neighborhoods. People stopped on the streets and pointed upward, their faces filled with wonder and fear. The ships made no sound as they hovered perfectly still in the air like silent metal mountains. President Kim received the emergency call at exactly 9:15 in the morning. The voice on the phone was shaking. As it delivered the impossible news, alien spacecraft had arrived, and they were requesting a meeting with Earth leaders. Within 2 hours, every major government on the planet was in emergency session, while millions of people watched news broadcasts, showing the incredible sight. The largest ship slowly descended toward the Han River, its hull gleaming like polished mirror. The ship was beautiful in a way that human technology could never match. Smooth curves flowed along its surface and strange symbols glowed with soft blue light. As it landed, the water around it began to glow the same blue color and steam rose into the air. A ramp extended from the ship's side, and 6 figures walked down toward the waiting crowd of government officials and military personnel. The aliens were tall and graceful, standing nearly 8 feet high. Their skin had a silver metallic shine, and they moved with fluid motions that seemed almost like dancing. Each alien had 4 arms that ended in long, delicate fingers. The leader of the group stepped forward and spoke in perfect Korean, his voice somehow appearing directly in everyone's minds without using sound. He introduced himself as Commander Taemin of the Galactic Defense Alliance and explained that his people had been watching Earth for many decades. They knew about human languages and customs from their long observation. Commander Taemin told the assembled humans about a terrible threat that was sweeping across the galaxy. The Void Hunters were a savage race that destroyed entire planets and enslaved any survivors they found. They had already consumed hundreds of worlds and were moving closer to Earth with each passing month. The Alliance had been fighting them for 3 years and losing badly. The alien commander explained that every intelligent species in the galaxy was required to contribute soldiers to fight against this common enemy. Earth would need to send its best warriors to join the Galactic Army or face destruction. When the Void Hunters eventually arrived, the choice was simple: join the fight or watch Earth burn. President Kim called for an immediate gathering of military leaders from around the world. Within hours, representatives from every major nation had arrived in Seoul. The Americans brought General Martinez, who commanded their Special Operations Forces. The Russians sent Colonel Petrov from the elite Spetsnaz units. The British arrived with Major Thompson from the SASIAC nation, wanted to show off their finest soldiers, hoping to impress the alien observers. The German KSK demonstrated room-clearing techniques with precision timing. The French Foreign Legion showed their endurance by completing obstacle courses in full gear. The Israeli Thai commandos displayed urban warfare tactics that had been perfected through decades of conflict. Commander Taemin watched all these demonstrations with polite interest, but his expression never changed. The other aliens in his group whispered among themselves in their strange musical language, occasionally nodding or shaking their heads. The humans could sense that something was wrong, but nobody understood what the problem might be. Lieutenant Commander Park arrived late to the gathering. Had been leading a training exercise in the mountains when the emergency recall came through. Park was a Navy SEAL with 15 years of experience in special operations. He was not the largest or strongest soldier present, and he did not try to impress anyone with flashy demonstrations. When Park was introduced to the alien delegation, Commander Taemin barely looked at him. The alien commander had already seen dozens of human soldiers that day, and this one seemed no different from the others. Park was average height with quiet brown eyes and calloused hands. He wore his uniform without any special decorations or medals. The real shock came when Commander Taemin decided to show the humans what real galactic soldiers looked like. He activated a device on his wrist and 6 more aliens materialized in the room. These were warriors from different species across the galaxy, and each one was more impressive than anything Earth had ever produced. The first warrior was a crystal being that stood 10 feet tall. Its body was made of living diamond that could deflect bullets and energy weapons. The creature could shoot beams of pure light from its hands that could cut through steel. The second warrior was an insect-like creature, with 6 arms each ending in razor-sharp claws that could tear through armor. The third warrior appeared to be made of living metal. Its body could change shape and repair itself from almost any damage. The fourth was a plant creature with vines, for arms that could stretch across a room and crush enemies. The fifth looked like a walking tank with natural armor plating and built-in weapons. The sixth warrior was pure energy contained in a force field suit. These galactic soldiers demonstrated their abilities with casual ease. The crystal being punched through a concrete wall without effort, the insect warrior moved faster than human eyes could follow. The metal soldier absorbed gunfire without taking any damage. The plant creature lifted a car over its head using only its vine arms. Commander Taman gestured toward the human soldiers and spoke to his warrior companions in their alien language. The galactic soldiers looked at the humans and began making sounds that could only be laughter. One of them pointed at General Martinez and said something that made the others laugh even harder. The alien commander turned back to President Kim and explained the situation with brutal honesty. Human soldiers were the weakest warriors. The Alliance had ever encountered Earth technology was thousands of years behind galactic standards. Human physical capabilities were inferior to every other species in the known galaxy. The humans in the room felt a crushing sense of inadequacy. As the reality sank in, they had spent their entire lives believing that human soldiers were the finest warriors in the universe. Now they discovered that compared to galactic standards, they were like children playing with toy weapons. Commander Taman continued his explanation. The Alliance was desperate for soldiers and would accept Earth warriors despite their obvious limitations. Humans would be given special equipment designed for lesser species and assigned to support roles away. From the most dangerous combat, the galactic soldiers would handle the real fighting. The alien warriors filed past the human soldiers on their way back to the ship. One of them stopped in front of Park and looked down at him with something that might have been pity. The creature said something in its alien language, and the others laughed again as they walked away. Park stood perfectly still during this humiliation, his face showing no emotion at all. While the other human soldiers looked angry or embarrassed, Park simply observed everything with calm attention. He watched how the aliens moved and noted the way they interacted with each other. He filed away every detail for future reference. As the demonstration ended, Commander Taman announced that Earth had 1 week to select 50 soldiers for the Galactic Army. Transport ships would arrive to collect the chosen warriors and take them to the military training facility. The alien commander warned that the training would be unlike anything humans had ever experienced that evening. As government officials argued about which soldiers to send, Park walked alone along the Han River. The alien ships still hovered overhead, their blue lights reflecting on the water. He thought about everything he had seen and heard. The aliens considered humans weak and useless, but Park had noticed something they missed. Every species the aliens had shown relied entirely on their natural advantages. The crystal being was strong but slow. The insect warrior was fast but fragile. The metal soldier was tough but predictable. They had never needed to develop the skills that humans took for granted: adaptation, creativity, and the ability to succeed. Despite overwhelming disadvantages, Park smiled slightly as he watched the alien lights dance on the water. The galactic soldiers had made one critical mistake in their assessment of human capabilities. They assumed that physical weakness meant military weakness. They had no idea what humans could accomplish when they had no choice but to find another way to win. The transport ship that came for Earth soldiers was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It stretched for miles across the sky like a floating city made of metal and light. When the 50 selected warriors walked up the boarding ramp, they found themselves in corridors so vast that aircraft could fly through them. The walls pulsed with energy, and the floor felt warm beneath their feet. Sergeant Yoon from the Korean Marines stayed close to his teammates as they followed glowing path markers through the ship. The other human soldiers looked just as overwhelmed as he felt. Captain Rodriguez from the U.S. Army Rangers kept touching the walls as if he could not believe they were real. Major Singh from the Indian Special Forces walked with, his mouth hanging open at the incredible technology surrounding them. The journey to Kepler Station took 3 days, but it felt like traveling through a dream. The transport ship moved faster than light itself, bending space around it in ways that human science said was impossible. Through the viewing windows, the soldiers could see stars streaming past like rivers of light and galaxies spinning in the distance like cosmic whirlpools. When they finally arrived at Kepler Station, the humans discovered that their new home was a military base the size of a small moon. The station orbited a blue giant star that painted everything in brilliant azure light. Docking bays stretched for miles and could accommodate thousands of ships at once. The scale of everything made Earth technology look like cave paintings. Commander Taman met the human soldiers at the arrival platform, and his expression showed barely concealed disappointment. He gestured for them to follow him through the station, corridors that were filled with warriors from dozens of different alien species. Each creature they passed was more intimidating than the last. The Zentari warriors stood 12 feet tall with blue skin and natural armor plating. Their arms were as thick as tree trunks, and their hands ended in claws that could tear through metal. When Sergeant Yoon tried to introduce himself to a group of them, they burst into laughter that sounded like grinding stone. One Zentari warrior poked Yoon in the chest with a finger the size of a sausage. "Look at this tiny creature," the Zentari said in heavily accented Galactic standard. "It probably cannot even lift our weapons. How did such a weak species develop space travel?" The other Zentari warriors laughed even harder as they walked away, leaving Yoon feeling foolish and small. The station housed creatures that seemed to come from nightmares rather than distant planets. There were shadow beings that could walk through walls and appeared as living darkness with glowing red eyes. The plasma lords were beings of pure energy contained in power armor that crackled with lightning. Their very presence made the air smell of ozone and burned metal. Robot soldiers called constructors moved through the halls in perfect formation. Their bodies were built from materials harder than diamond, and their computer brains could calculate battle tactics in microseconds. When Captain Lee from the Army Rangers tried to examine their weapons, one constructor turned its head toward him with a mechanical whir that sounded like mockery. The training facilities made human military bases look like children playgrounds. The main combat simulator was a chamber the size of a football stadium that could recreate any environment in the galaxy. Trainees fought in the depths of gas giant atmospheres where the pressure would crush human bones. They practiced combat in the hearts of stars, where temperatures reached millions of degrees. Human soldiers received special environmental suits and weapons designed for what the aliens called lesser species. The suits were bulky and uncomfortable, but they allowed humans to survive in conditions that would instantly kill them. The weapons were simplified versions of standard galactic firearms with reduced power settings and automatic safety features. During their first training exercise, Captain Rodriguez found himself gasping for breath, while alien soldiers barely seemed to notice the extreme conditions. They were practicing urban warfare in a simulated city where gravity was 3 times stronger than Earth normal, and the atmosphere was poisonous. The other soldiers moved through the environment as easily as humans walked through a park, private. Chen from the Chinese Special Forces collapsed during a simple obstacle course that involved climbing a wall in zero gravity. The magnetic handholds were designed for creatures with natural strength far beyond human capabilities. While Chen struggled to pull himself up, insect warriors scuttled up the same wall using their claws like they were walking on flat ground. The alien instructors made no effort to hide their contempt for human capabilities. Drill Sergeant Crix was a 10-foot-tall creature with 6 arms and skin like leather. He would point at struggling human soldiers and announce to the entire training group that this was what happened when evolution failed to produce proper warriors. During weapons training, the differences became even more obvious. Standard galactic rifles weighed over 100 pounds and had recoil that could break human bones. The energy output was measured in units that could vaporize small buildings. Human soldiers received training weapons that were basically toys compared to what real warriors carried. Lieutenant Commander Park observed all of this without complaint, while other human soldiers grew angry or discouraged. He watched how different alien species fought and moved. He noticed that the crystal beings were incredibly strong, but their attacks followed predictable geometric patterns. The insect warriors were lightning fast, but they panicked when separated from their swarm units. The robot soldiers were nearly indestructible, but they relied entirely on programmed responses and could not adapt when situations changed unexpectedly. The shadow beings could phase through solid matter, but bright lights disrupted their abilities. The plasma lords had devastating firepower, but their energy signatures made them easy to detect, and Park spent his free time in the station's technical libraries reading about galactic military history. He learned about famous battles and legendary warriors. He studied the tactics that different species used and the weaknesses that their enemies had exploited. The other human soldiers thought he was wasting time that should be spent training. Sergeant Yoon finally asked Park why he was not practicing with weapons like everyone else. Park explained that he was practicing something more important. He was learning to think like his opponents and understand their assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. Most species fought the same way their ancestors had fought for millions of years. The breaking point came during a joint training exercise where mixed teams of different species had to capture an enemy position. The alien soldiers charged forward, using their natural advantages. The crystal beings absorbed enemy fire while advancing. The insect warriors flanked at incredible speed. The robot soldiers calculated optimal firing positions. Every alien team used variations of the same basic strategy, overwhelming force applied at the point of maximum advantage. It was efficient and brutal, and it worked perfectly against enemies who fought using similar methods. The human soldiers tried to copy these tactics and failed miserably, because they lacked the physical capabilities to make them work after another. Humiliating defeat. Major Singh approached Park with frustration written across his face. How are we supposed to compete with beings who can punch through walls and run faster than our bullets? Park looked at the alien warriors celebrating their victory and smiled quietly. We are not supposed to compete with them, Park said. We are supposed to do something they cannot do. We are supposed to think of solutions they would never consider, because their natural gifts make such solutions unnecessary. Every species here relies on the advantages evolution gave them. We rely on the advantages we had to create ourselves. That night, Park sat alone in his quarters, studying technical manuals about station systems and maintenance procedures. He memorized the locations of power conduits and water recycling plants. He learned about atmospheric controls and artificial gravity generators. The other soldiers assumed he was trying to understand alien technology. In reality, Park was doing something much more practical. He was learning about the environment around them so he could use it as a weapon when the time came. He understood that humans would never win by being stronger or faster than their opponents. They would win by being smarter, more adaptable. The alien soldiers continued to laugh at human weakness, but Park noticed something they missed. Every species at the station had evolved to fight in specific ways that matched their home planets and natural abilities. They were incredibly effective within their specialties, but they struggled when forced to operate outside their comfort zones. Humans were different because Earth had forced them to be different. They had evolved on a planet where they were not the strongest or fastest, or most dangerous creatures. They had survived by learning to adapt to any situation and use whatever tools were available. That experience had taught them skills that more naturally gifted species had never needed to develop. Park fell asleep that night with a small smile on his face. The Galactic soldiers thought they understood what humans were capable of, but they were making the same mistake that predators on Earth had made for millions of years. They were underestimating the most dangerous animal on the planet, the one that survived not because of what it was, but because of what it could become, when it had no other choice. The emergency klaxons screamed through Kepler Station at 0400 hours, jolting every soldier awake with their bone-chilling wail. Commander Tae-min broadcast an urgent message over the station communication system. Void Hunter raiders had attacked a civilian transport convoy near the Outer Rim, and hundreds of innocent lives were at stake. The transport ship Harmony carried refugees from 3 different worlds, including families with children who were fleeing the advancing Void Hunter fleet. The raiders had disabled the ship's engines and were systematically hunting down civilians throughout the vessel's corridors. Time was running short before they would breach the main passenger compartments. This would be the first real combat mission for the human soldiers, and Commander Taemin made it clear that he expected them to stay out of the way. The Galactic warriors would handle the actual fighting, while humans provided support from a safe distance. Their job was to observe and learn not to interfere with professional soldiers. The strike force assembled in the main hangar bay was the most impressive display of military might that human eyes had ever witnessed. 200 elite warriors from 12 different species stood ready for battle. Their weapons gleamed with deadly energy and their armor could deflect anything the Void Hunters might throw at them. Captain Zorx led a squad of crystal beings whose diamond-hard bodies could absorb tremendous damage. While their energy weapons could cut through starship hulls, the insect warriors chittered excitedly as they checked their razor-sharp claws and prepared for the lightning-fast combat they were famous for throughout the galaxy. The robot soldiers ran final diagnostic checks on their weapon systems while uploading tactical data about Void Hunter combat patterns. Their mechanical brains calculated optimal firing solutions and predicted enemy movements with mathematical precision. The shadow beings flickered in and out of visibility as they tested their phase shift abilities. Lieutenant Commander Park stood with the other human soldiers near the back of the formation, wearing standard-issue armor that looked primitive compared to alien technology. His weapon was a simple projectile rifle that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. The other species had stopped noticing humans entirely during mission briefings. The transport to the Harmony took only minutes, but the scene that greeted them was worse than anyone had expected. The civilian ship was a massive vessel designed to carry thousands of passengers in comfortable quarters. Now its hull was torn open in multiple places and atmosphere leaked into space through jagged holes. Void Hunters were nightmare creatures that defied rational description. They stood 8 feet tall on legs like tree trunks with skin that looked like melted plastic. Their heads held multiple faces that constantly shifted and changed expression. Their claws dripped with acid that could dissolve metal, and their roars could be heard even in the vacuum of space. The Galactic forces deployed according to standard military doctrine, overwhelming force applied at multiple points to crush enemy resistance quickly. The crystal beings charged through the main breach points, absorbing Void Hunter attacks while returning devastating fire. The insect warriors used their speed to flank around enemy positions. Everything went wrong within the first 5 minutes of combat. The Void Hunters had spent decades learning how galactic forces operated, and they had prepared accordingly. Hidden explosive traps detonated when the crystal beings stepped on pressure plates, sending fragments of their own diamond bodies flying like shrapnel. The insect warriors found themselves caught in corridors flooded with acid gas that burned through their natural armor. The shadow beings discovered that the Void Hunters had installed powerful lights throughout the ship that disrupted their phasing abilities and left them solid and vulnerable. Robot soldiers calculated perfect firing solutions only to discover that Void Hunters moved in unpredictable patterns that defied mathematical analysis. Their computer brains struggled to adapt when enemies refused to behave according to programmed expectations. The mechanical warriors stood frozen for crucial seconds, while Void Hunters closed the distance. Commander Taemin watched his carefully planned assault collapse into chaos as elite galactic warriors fell back in confusion. The Void Hunters pressed their advantage, driving the invaders toward the breach points while civilians screamed in terror from deeper in the ship. The rescue mission was becoming a complete disaster. The crystal beings discovered that their energy weapons were accidentally damaging the ship's life support systems. Every blast that missed a Void Hunter punched holes in bulkheads and severed power cables. The insect warriors found their formation tactics useless in the tight spaces where they could not use their numbers effectively. Park moved through the battle like a ghost, while larger warriors crashed around him, making noise and drawing attention. He had memorized the ship's layout during the approach flight and now used maintenance tunnels that were too small for either Void Hunters or galactic soldiers to enter. While alien warriors relied on their natural advantages, Park used the ship itself as his weapon. He rigged emergency bulkhead doors to slam shut at precisely the right moment, trapping groups of Void Hunters in compartments that could be sealed and flooded with knockout gas from the life support systems. The Void Hunters had never encountered an enemy who fought like Park did. They were used to facing opponents who relied on strength, speed, or firepower to win battles. This small, quiet human used stealth, patience, and the environment around him in ways they had never seen before. When a family of alien civilians became trapped in a storage bay with 3 Void Hunter warriors advancing on them, Park appeared behind the enemies without making a sound. He had crawled through cargo handling ducts and emerged from a maintenance panel that the creatures never thought to guard, using nothing but a combat knife and perfect timing. Park eliminated all 3 Void Hunters before they realized he was there. The rescued family stared at him in shock, unable to understand how this small human had just saved their lives from monsters that their own world's greatest warriors feared. Word spread through the battle communications that someone was rescuing civilians from impossible situations. Galactic soldiers reported sightings of a human moving through areas that should have been suicide to enter bodies of dead void. Hunters were found in locations where no large warrior could have reached. Park continued his invisible war throughout the ship, using tactics that made no sense. To anyone who had not grown up on a planet where humans were the physically weakest intelligent species, he used improvised explosives made from cleaning supplies and set traps using cargo handling equipment. The turning point came when a group of Void Hunter reinforcements prepared to breach the main passenger deck, where over 1,000 civilians were hiding. The Galactic forces had been driven back and could not reach the area in time to prevent a massacre that would haunt the Galaxy Park. Reach the passenger deck through an air recycling shaft that connected to the environmental systems. He had no backup and no heavy weapons, but he had something more valuable, a complete understanding of how the ship's internal systems worked and the willingness to use that knowledge creatively. As the Void Hunters prepared to break down the armored doors leading to the civilians, Park systematically disabled the artificial gravity in their section of the ship. The creatures found themselves floating helplessly as he activated emergency fire suppression systems that filled the area with foam, unable to move effectively in zero gravity, and blinded by the foam, the Void Hunters became easy targets for Park's rifle. He picked them off one by one using techniques he had learned hunting deer in the mountains of earth-patient stillness, and perfectly placed shots that never missed their target. When Galactic reinforcements finally reached the passenger deck, they found Park calmly helping evacuate civilians while the bodies of 12 Void Hunter warriors floated in the foam around him. The alien soldiers could not understand how one human had accomplished what an entire battalion of their finest troops had failed to do. Commander Taman arrived to find his most elite warriors wounded and demoralized while the human he had dismissed as useless had saved the entire mission. The crystal beings nursed damaged bodies while the insect warriors tended to acid burns. The robot soldiers ran endless diagnostics trying to understand what had gone wrong. Park stood quietly among the rescued civilians, making no attempt to claim credit for the victory. When Commander Tamin asked him to explain what had happened, Park simply said that he had used the tools available to solve the problem. The alien commander stared at him with something that might have been the beginning of understanding. The transport back to Kepler Station was filled with whispered conversations as alien soldiers tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. The small, weak human who could barely lift their weapons had somehow succeeded, where all their natural advantages had failed. As the station appeared in the viewports, Park allowed himself a small smile. The Galactic soldiers were finally beginning to learn the most important lesson that Earth had to teach them. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what you are, but from what you choose to become when everything else fails. News of Park's impossible victory spread through Kepler Station like wildfire, carried by returning soldiers who could barely believe what they had witnessed. The crystal beings spoke in hushed tones about the human who moved like shadow through spaces where their diamond bodies could never fit. The insect warriors clicked their mandibles nervously when describing how he had appeared behind enemies, without making a sound. Sergeant Yoon finally cornered Park in the mess hall during the quiet hours when most alien soldiers were in their regeneration cycles. He sat down across from his fellow human and asked the question that everyone was thinking: how did you do it? Those creatures are stronger, faster, and tougher than us in every possible way. Park looked up from his meal of synthesized protein and artificial vegetables that the station provided for human consumption. He had been expecting this conversation and had spent considerable time thinking about how to explain concepts that most people had never needed to consider. They rely on their gifts. Park said simply, the crystal beings trust their diamond skin to protect them, so they never learn to avoid being hit. The insect warriors depend on their speed, so they never developed patience. The robot soldiers believe their calculations are perfect, so they cannot adapt when reality disagrees with their programming. Yoon shook his head with frustration. That does not answer my question. You are still just one human with basic weapons. How do you kill creatures that can tear through starship hulls with their bare claws? Park smiled and gestured around the mess hall at the various alien species eating their meals. "Look at them closely," Park said. "Every species here evolved on worlds where they were the dominant predators. They never had to learn what we learned on Earth. We shared our planet with creatures that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than us. We survived by becoming something they were not the next." Mission briefing came 3 days later and brought news that made every soldier in the room tense with anticipation. Intelligence had located a Void Hunter command ship hiding in the Kepler asteroid belt. The vessel was coordinating attacks throughout the sector, and its destruction could save dozens of worlds. Commander Taemin outlined the standard battle plan. 200 galactic warriors would assault the command ship using overwhelming firepower. The crystal beings would absorb enemy fire. While advancing, the insect warriors would use their speed to flank. The robot soldiers would provide precision fire support from calculated positions. Park raised his hand and spoke for the first time during a mission briefing. "Commander, I request permission to take a small team on an alternative approach. Give me 3 volunteers and a scout ship. We can end this without losing a single galactic soldier." The alien commander stared at Park as if he had suggested flying into the asteroid belts. Central Star. The idea of sending 4 humans against a Void Hunter command ship sounded like elaborate suicide. Even after the transport rescue, many galactic soldiers still considered it a lucky accident rather than skill. Commander Taemin refused the request and proceeded with the conventional assault plan. 3 hours later, the galactic fleet engaged the Void Hunter command ship in a battle that could be seen from the observation decks of Kepler station. Energy weapons lit up space like an artificial aurora as hundreds of fighters swarmed around the massive enemy vessel. The battle went exactly as Park had predicted. The Void Hunters had studied galactic tactics for decades and prepared accordingly. The command ship was equipped with weapons specifically designed to counter crystal being armor, insect warrior speed, and robot soldier precision. The galactic forces took massive casualties while inflicting minimal damage. 37 elite warriors died in the first wave of attacks, including Captain Zorix, whose diamond body was shattered by a resonance weapon that turned his greatest strength into fatal weakness. The insect warriors found themselves caught in energy nets that neutralized their speed advantage. The robot soldiers discovered that their targeting systems were being jammed by advanced electronic warfare. Commander Taemin watched his finest troops fall back in defeat as the Void Hunter command ship prepared to escape into hyperspace. The alien commander realized with growing horror that his conventional tactics were useless against an enemy that understood them better than he understood himself. Park appeared on the command bridge without invitation or fanfare. He wore his standard combat gear and carried only basic human weapons. His 3 volunteers followed behind him. Corporal Hyun from the Korean Marines, Private Sujin from the Air Force, Special Operations, and Private Chen from the Chinese Special Forces. "Commander, I request immediate permission to attempt alternative approach," Park said calmly. "The current strategy has failed and the enemy will escape within 30 minutes. Our small team can succeed where the main force cannot." The alien commander looked at the tactical display showing his defeated warriors limping back to their ships. Then he looked at the 4 humans standing quietly before him. Their equipment looked primitive and their physical capabilities were laughable compared to galactic standards, but they had something his elite forces lacked. "Take a scout ship," Commander Taemin said grimly. "If you fail, we lose 4 soldiers instead of 200. If you succeed, perhaps I will begin to understand what humans are truly capable of." The scout ship was barely larger than a fighter and carried no heavy weapons. Its only advantages were speed stealth systems and the ability to maneuver in tight spaces. The 4 humans launched toward the asteroid field, while alien survivors watched from their battle-damaged vessels. Park piloted the scout ship through the asteroid field using techniques that defied standard navigation protocols. Instead of following clear flight paths, he wove between tumbling rocks, using gravitational effects to mask their approach. The Void Hunters had sensors that could detect any conventional attack, but they were not watching for something so small and unpredictable. The command ship was a massive vessel, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could deflect Starship-class attacks, but it had one weakness that the Void Hunters had never considered important. The waste disposal system that removed garbage and sewage was too small and disgusting for any galactic warrior to use as an attack route. Park docked the scout ship to a waste processing port that was hidden beneath the command ship's main hull. The opening was barely large enough for humans to crawl through and was filled with biological waste that would sicken most species. The 4 humans squeezed through the cramped tunnel while breathing through filtration masks. Inside the command ship, they found themselves in a maze of maintenance tunnels that connected all the major systems. Void hunters were large, powerful creatures who never considered that enemies might attack through spaces designed for automated cleaning robots. The humans moved through the ship's internal structure like blood flowing through veins. Corporal Hyun had trained as an electronics specialist, and he quickly identified the ship's main computer core. Private Sujin was an explosives expert who began placing charges on critical power conduits. Private Chen specialized in close-quarters combat and took position to guard their escape route. Park coordinated the operation using hand signals to maintain perfect silence. The Void Hunter command staff never realized they were under attack until it was too late. Park's team had systematically disabled the ships, weapons, shields, life support, and engines using nothing more than basic explosives and technical knowledge. When the ship began losing power and atmosphere, the crew panicked. Park reached the command bridge through a ventilation shaft that emerged behind the captain's chair. The Void Hunter commander was an ancient creature covered in battle scars from decades of conquest. It stood 12 feet tall with natural armor and claws that could tear through metal. The final confrontation should have been impossible. Park weighed less than 200 pounds and carried only a knife and sidearm against a monster that had killed hundreds of galactic warriors in personal combat. But the human had advantages that physical strength could not match. Park used the ship's artificial gravity system against his opponent, systematically adjusting the gravity fields to throw the massive creature off balance. When the Void Hunter tried to charge, Park reversed the gravity and sent it crashing into the ceiling. When it tried to use its claws, Park increased gravity and pinned it to the floor. The ancient warrior had never faced an enemy who could control the battlefield itself. It was used to opponents who fought with honor, using strength and courage. Park fought with intelligence and creativity, using every available tool to even the odds between them. The battle ended when Park triggered the emergency evacuation system that was designed to eject the command bridge in case of catastrophic damage. The Void Hunter commander found itself trapped in an escape pod while Park remained behind to complete the ship's destruction. 20 minutes later, the Void Hunter command ship exploded in a spectacular fireball that lit up the entire asteroid field. Park and his team escaped in their scout ship while debris from the enemy vessel scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers. The Galactic fleet watched in stunned silence as 4 humans accomplished what 200 elite warriors could not. Commander Tae-min met them at the docking bay with an expression of complete bewilderment on his alien features. He had commanded galactic forces for over 50 years and had never seen anything like what the humans. The destruction of the Void Hunter command ship sent shockwaves through the Galactic Defense Alliance that reached far beyond Kepler Station. For the first time in 3 years of brutal warfare, the Alliance had captured intact enemy technology and living prisoners. Intelligence officers from a dozen species descended on the wreckage like scavengers picking through ancient ruins. The captured Void Hunter systems revealed secrets that changed everything the Alliance thought they knew about their enemies. The creatures were not the mindless destroyers that galactic propaganda portrayed. They were intelligent, strategic thinkers who had been studying Alliance tactics for decades and developing specific counters for every conventional military approach. More importantly, the successful mission proved that human methods could succeed where traditional galactic warfare failed. The crystal beings, insect warriors, and robot soldiers who had previously dismissed Earth troops as useless. Primitives now watched the humans with grudging curiosity, mixed with something that might have been respect. Commander Tae-min approached Park 3 days after the mission with a request that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. The alien commander wanted Park to teach Alliance forces how to fight using human methods. The galactic military leadership had finally realized that their conventional superiority meant nothing against enemies who understood it better than they did. Park agreed to the training program but insisted on setting his own conditions. He would not simply teach tactics or techniques. He would teach the fundamental thinking patterns that made human warfare different from everything else in the galaxy. The alien soldiers would have to learn to see conflict through completely different eyes. The first training session took place in a modified combat simulator that had been reprogrammed to create scenarios where traditional advantages were neutralized. Park faced a mixed group of 30 soldiers representing 8 different species. Each warrior was confident that their natural abilities would allow them to adapt quickly to human methods. Sergeant Yoon began the demonstration by showing the aliens how to create improvised weapons using common materials. The Galactic soldiers watched with barely concealed amusement as he turned maintenance tools into deadly implements. Most species had never needed to improvise because their natural weapons were superior to anything they could construct. The crystal beings were particularly skeptical about the concept of improvised weaponry. Their diamond-hard bodies were living weapons that could shatter steel and deflect energy. The intelligence report that arrived at Kepler Station sent shockwaves through every level of the Alliance command structure. Void Hunter deep space monitoring stations had detected a massive fleet assembling at the edge of known space. The Armada contained over 10,000 ships carrying millions of enemy soldiers and enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. This was the final assault that Alliance strategists had feared since the war began. The Void Hunters were preparing to strike at the heart of galactic civilization, targeting the core worlds where billions of civilians lived in peaceful ignorance of the horrors sweeping toward them. If this attack succeeded, the war would be over, and countless species would face extinction or eternal slavery. Every available ship and soldier was recalled to defend the Alliance capital system. Emergency construction yards worked around the clock to complete half-finished warships, while civilian transports were hastily converted into military vessels. The mobilization was the largest in galactic history, but everyone knew it might not be enough. Park found himself promoted to strategic advisor, working directly with the Alliance High Council in their underground command center. The irony was not lost on him that just months earlier, these same alien leaders had dismissed humans as too weak to contribute meaningfully to galactic warfare. The High Council chamber was a vast circular room where representatives from dozens of species debated strategy, while holographic displays showed the approaching enemy fleet. Alliance Grand Marshal Zeth was a towering crystal being whose faceted body reflected the light from tactical screens as he outlined the traditional defensive plan. We will meet them at the system boundary with everything we have. Grand Marshal Zeth announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never lost a major battle. The enemy expects us to defend from static positions, so we will attack their fleet directly and destroy them before they can reach our worlds. Park studied the tactical displays showing both fleets and shook his head quietly. The Alliance plan was exactly what any galactic commander would devise, and exactly what the Void Hunters would be prepared to counter. He requested permission to address the Council and outline an alternative strategy. Instead of one massive battle, I propose we avoid direct fleet engagement entirely, Park said as shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. We break human forces into small infiltration teams. Each team targets specific enemy ships using stealth and sabotage. We turn their own fleet against them. The Council erupted in angry protests. General Quan buzzed his wings frantically as he denounced the suggestion. This goes against every principle of honorable warfare. You ask us to skulk in shadows like criminals instead of meeting our enemies in glorious battle. Commander Taiman supported Park's proposal, having learned to trust human tactical thinking, but other council members remained skeptical. The crystal beings argued that their superior firepower could win any direct engagement. The robot soldiers calculated that conventional tactics had the highest probability of success. Grand Marshal Zeth called for a vote, and the council narrowly approved the traditional battle plan with human infiltration. As a secondary operation, Park would be allowed to take volunteer teams on their stealth mission, but the main Alliance fleet would engage the enemy in conventional space combat. The greatest battle in galactic history began exactly as predicted, when long-range sensors detected the Void Hunter Armada entering the outer system. The enemy fleet stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space with massive dreadnoughts surrounded by clouds of smaller vessels. Alliance forces met them at the asteroid belt in a clash that could be seen from planets throughout the system. Energy weapons lit up space like artificial stars while fighters swarmed between capital ships like angry insects. The battle was beautiful and terrible. As thousands of vessels exchanged devastating firepower, Park watched the main engagement from the bridge of a captured Void Hunter stealth ship surrounded by 12 SEAL teams that had volunteered for what everyone assumed was a suicide mission. Each team consisted of 4 humans, equipped with basic gear and improvised weapons that looked pathetic compared to Galactic military hardware. The human teams launched toward different sections of the enemy fleet using captured technology to avoid detection. Their tiny ships were invisible among the massive dreadnoughts that dominated the battlefield, while Alliance and Void Hunter forces hammered each other with weapons that could crack planet's Team Alpha. Targeted the enemy flagship, a vessel so large, it had its own internal atmosphere and gravity. Team Beta aimed for the main communications relay that coordinated. The entire fleet Team Gamma went after the supply ships that carried ammunition and fuel. For the assault force, Park led Team Prime toward the most dangerous target, the enemy command and control center housed in a fortress ship that bristled with defensive systems. The vessel was protected by energy shields that could deflect starship weapons and automated defenses that could destroy approaching fighters. The infiltration began exactly as Park had planned during months of preparation of the Humans used maintenance ports and waste disposal systems to enter enemy ships through openings too small for Galactic soldiers to use. Once inside, they moved through service tunnels that connected all major systems. Team Alpha discovered that the enemy flagship was commanded by an ancient Void Hunter, whose species had been fighting Galactic forces for over a century. The creature knew every conventional tactic and had prepared counters for every standard Alliance strategy, but it had no understanding of human methods. The SEAL team used the ship's own environmental systems against its crew, gradually increasing carbon dioxide levels throughout the vessel, while decreasing oxygen concentration. The enemy soldiers became sluggish and confused without understanding why their performance was deteriorating. Team Beta reached the communications relay and discovered that it was protected by security systems designed to prevent Galactic hacking attempts. But the Void Hunters had never encountered human social engineering techniques. The team convinced automated systems that they were maintenance personnel by using captured access codes. Instead of destroying the communications equipment, the humans reprogrammed it to send false orders throughout the enemy fleet. Ships received contradictory commands that sent them toward wrong targets or caused them to fire on their own allies. The careful coordination of the Void Hunter assault began falling apart. Team Gamma found the enemy supply ships and used their explosives training to create chain reactions in ammunition storage areas. The resulting explosions destroyed dozens of vessels and cut off fuel supplies to frontline combat ships. Enemy dreadnoughts found themselves running low on power while engaged in desperate battle. Park reached the command center through a route that defied every principle of military architecture. He had crawled through the ship's sewage processing system and emerged in the commander's private quarters. The ancient Void Hunter leader was alone reviewing battle reports when Park appeared like a ghost. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the enemy fortress, surrounded by technology that represented millions of years of military evolution. The Void Hunter Supreme Commander was a creature of living nightmare whose species had conquered hundreds of worlds through pure savagery. But Park did not fight the monster with strength or advanced weapons. Instead, he used the creature's own ship against it. He activated emergency evacuation protocols that were designed to jettison critical systems in case of catastrophic damage. The command center became a death trap as bulkheads sealed and atmosphere vented into space. The ancient commander tried to stop the evacuation sequence but discovered that human hackers had already taken control of the ship's computer systems. Every command it entered was overridden by programs that Park had installed using techniques no Galactic education had ever taught. As the command center began breaking apart, Park escaped through the same sewage system he had used to enter the Void Hunter leader found itself trapped in an escape pod, while its fortress ship exploded around it. The supreme commander of the invasion fleet was defeated, not by superior force but by a human who understood that every strength could become a weakness. The destruction of the command ship sent shockwaves through the entire Void Hunter fleet, as subordinate commanders lost contact with their leadership ships that had been advancing in perfect formation. suddenly found themselves operating without coordination or strategic direction. The chain reaction of sabotage spread throughout the enemy armada as human teams completed their missions. Supply ships exploded in brilliant fireballs that consumed entire battle groups. Communications failures caused friendly fire incidents that destroyed more vessels than Alliance weapons had. Managed to hit within 6 hours, the most powerful invasion fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered groups of confused ships fleeing toward the edge of the system. The Void Hunters, who had seemed unstoppable just days earlier, were now running for their lives from an enemy they could not understand. Alliance forces pursued the retreating enemy, but found little resistance remaining. The few Void Hunter ships that tried to make a stand discovered that their crews were demoralized, and their command structure had collapsed. Human methods had accomplished what conventional warfare could never achieve. The celebration that followed lasted for days as worlds their